In this first talk on player preferences for play of the game, a study of player engagement on video game highlights. In this talk, Jordan Black will be presenting joint work with Renee Bryce, exploring features of video game play highlights that promote greater player engagement and video game success. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Black, and today I'll be discussing player preferences for play the game, working towards better understanding what players find engaging in video game highlights. Let's begin. So we know that video game highlights are an important part of gamer culture. We understand from moments like Leroy Jenkins from World of Warcraft, or professional moments in esports like Evo Moment 37, or even photo mode like in Marvel Spider-Man, or streaming on Twitch. We know that video game highlights and media are an important part of gamer culture for several reasons. For players, it allows them for identity signaling, right, to express who they are as a person, allows them to build communities or have a sense of belonging. On the other hand, for developers, it allows for a more natural form of marketing, right? As players are able to share their self-expression, they can naturally market the game for developers. Allows for developers to keep players engaged even after they log off, right? Seeing more media of the game on social media. And finally, growing their player base, right? Where as new people see the media on social media, they might be encouraged to try the game for themselves. So in a way, it kind of creates this like cyclical nature, right, between players and developers, where players are able to use these highlights and clips to identify themselves, and developers are able to use it as a natural form of marketing that can go back into improving the experience for players, right? So given that highlights are so important for gamer culture, it was refreshing when moments like Overwatch and Marvel Rivals had these highlight systems built into the game, right? Where after a match, a player would be presented their highlights that they could save and share online. So quickly to go over an example of how this usually works, using the example of Overwatch, typically in like the top left, a player would play a match, and after a match concludes, a player is selected for Play the Game. Play the Game is basically a 20-second clip of a highlight of what a player did during that match to showcase the best moment during that match. After that, their Play the Games will be saved in another menu where they can save and share it, and ideally, they would share it on social media, right? Maybe with friends on Discord, maybe on Reddit, or Facebook or Instagram. They would share whatever clips they find most engaging from their time gaming. The issue occurs is what happens if these highlights presented to them are not as engaging? It can create a hurdle for players to share online, right? Because now their highlights being presented with aren't engaging, they're not interesting, and therefore it can disincentivize them from sharing the moments online, or can create hurdles where now they have to find it themselves, or they have to remember what moment during a match was most important or valuable to them. And so, given this experience, I wanted to see if players online had a similar sentiment, where highlights being presented weren't always most engaging. And this quote that I found online really kind of summarized how players felt. Play the game is designed to highlight the most skilled or impressive play during a match. In actuality, the play it chooses doesn't always make sense. Therefore, my research wants to better understand what are players looking for in play the game versus what's being selected. How can we better match player intuition with highlight selection from in-game tools? So with this goal in mind of trying to better line up player intuition with highlight selections, I had 4 research questions to kind of work towards a solution. The first one is what is the player sentiment towards play the game? There was a sentiment that I found online and from my own experience of play the game and other highlight systems from like Marvel Rivals. However, I wanted to make sure that the sentiment found online matched the wider player base. Next, I wanted to investigate, okay, what reasons lead to players skipping play the game? What reasons lead to them watching play the game at the end of the match, right? What are these factors that lead to the engagement of viewing play the game versus deciding to skip it and leave? And then finally, what changes do players want to see from play the game, right? What features they feel like would be most engaging, would really bring back that novelty to play the game and keep them plugged in and wanting to view more and share more with others. And the goal is by answering these questions, we can improve player satisfaction, player engagement, and then player social sharing. So leading to my first research question, my summary method, excuse me. So we had 102 participants recruited via Discord and Facebook. with groups dedicated to Overwatch. Data collection was done through a Qualtrics survey that took about 25 minutes. And that survey featured Likert scale questions and open-ended questions with the goal of better understanding participant satisfaction, viewing and skipping behavior, and design improvements. And then finally, our analysis was done through qualitative clustering of responses using close reading. So to kind of simplify the pipeline, we use Likert scale questions that would be followed by short answer responses. And from those responses, we would use close reading and clustering to better understand how players are feeling. And for this study, we use Overwatch 2. The reason is because they have this feature called Play the Game, which is like a 20-second highlight clip after every match. It's been a long-standing feature of the game and has allowed players to better refine their preferences for what they find engaging or not engaging for a highlight. There are other games like Marvel Rivals or Mecha Break that have these highlight systems, but given that Overwatch has been around for such a long time, players have really been able to refine their preferences versus newer titles that are just kind of coming into stride. So leading into my research questions, first we want to understand, okay, well, what is the player sentiment towards play of the game? If you see to the left, we have a bar graph with a Likert scale with a question, how would you rate your satisfaction on the current play of the game system in Overwatch? And what we found is a lot of players were somewhat satisfied, which is great, right? A lot of players still enjoy the concept of play of the game. A lot of players still find it exciting, and they still have a sense of accomplishment when selected, right? When they get to play the game themselves, they feel like, oh, this is great. I really feel good about myself. The issues occur is that sometimes play the game can also cause confusion for selections, right? When a play the game is being presented in the match, sometimes what's selected doesn't match their intuition, right? And so this can cause things like crucial moments being overlooked. Players feel like there's a lot of nuance being missed when these selections are occurring, right? They feel like some things like role representation isn't always accounted for, right? Where currently the game focuses on eliminations or getting kills, but sometimes other roles like tanks or supports do things that don't directly lead to eliminations, but can help facilitate them. And those can be equally as important, right? But oftentimes are overlooked and cause a role underrepresentation, right? Or sometimes they'll see a clip and they feel like it has like a minimal skill expression, right? Where it's like, okay, well, this clip really wasn't that impressive. I'm sure there were better moments throughout the match that could have been selected instead, right? And so once again, the issue is all the players like the idea of play the game. Sometimes selections can cause confusion, leading to a discrepancy between their intuition and what's selected. But overall, players still feel a sense of accomplishment and they still enjoy play the game, which is great. Leading to research question 2 and 3 for viewing and skipping. It's the top left, reasons for viewing. A big reason for participants viewing or deciding to play the game for both categories was if they were selected or a friend was selected. So if a player was selected or a friend was selected, they would really want to view it because they feel like, oh, I was selected, I did a good job, and I want to see what I did to receive that award, right? That public recognition was very, very important for engagement and really allowed players to want to view what happened, right? Other reasons for wanting to view play the game was just curiosity, right? Some players really wanted to see what was being selected, right? Others wanted to rewatch a specific moment during a match and see from a different POV. And then others just want to see, like, oh, how can I improve, right? If I watch another player, maybe that'll help me improve my own skill. On the other hand, for reasons people most frequently use to skip, once again, if it wasn't myself or a friend, I'm out. I'm just leaving, right? Participants mention that quite frequently. Another common reason was wanting to find another match, right? So if it wasn't me or a friend being selected, then I'm just going to leave. I want to find another match. And this is really found a lot between players who are very competitive, right? Who wanted to quickly like climb their ranks. It's like, you know what? I just really want to get in that grind. I don't have a lot of time. I just want to keep playing games. A very common reason also was loss of novelty, right? A lot of players feel like they can easily predict what play the game will be. They feel like they can understand what will be showcased. So they just kind of just tune out. So, you know what? It's fine. I've seen it all before. I'm just going to leave. And then number 4, another important reason people would skip play the game is their match experience. If it was a very toxic game where players were arguing a lot, where players were being toxic and harassing other people, sometimes they just want to leave that environment as quickly as possible, right? Disengage from what's happening in that match and hopefully go again or just hop off for the day, right? So these reasons really contributed towards players wanting to view or skip, with most frequent reason being, if it's me and a friend, then I really want to watch it because I feel like that recognition, sense of accomplishment really means a lot to me. And then finally, what changes do players want to see from play the game, right? And so there were a lot of reasons that players mentioned wanting to see changes to play the game, and we kind of clustered them in these four different categories. The first one being mechanical skill. They want to see things like difficult shots being hit, consecutive shots being hit in a row, showcasing high accuracy, tracking and flicking. Players also want to see more teamwork and play the games, right? Showcasing creative synergies, ultimate ability combinations, right? Or swapping between player POVs, right? This doesn't happen currently in Overwatch, but these are things that players want to see in the system as a whole, and wider highlights as a whole, wider aspect, I guess. And then finally, ability skills, right? They want to see things like saving a teammate's life, a support doing that, right? Or a tank maybe blocking an important ability, right? Or showcasing a good cooldown cycle. And then finally, they want to see less ultimates, right? They want to see ultimates that are more mechanically demanding. They want to see ultimates that have more flash and flare. And the idea is by implementing these attributes into highlight systems, we can then improve player pain points, right? Of increasing role representation, having a higher access per minute, right? Returning to novelty, right? By having maybe swapping player POVs, you can showcase a higher access per minute during clips versus it maybe being a bit stale or taking too long to ramp up or having a ending that's not as engaging, right? If you have showcase moments like ability skill, right, of maybe a teammate saving a teammate's life, you can show more roles rather than it being focused on maybe like DPS or damage characters or damage roles, right? You can show more tanks and supports. And so, really, what players are asking for is they want to see more skill expression and they want to see more nuanced highlights. They want to see these attributes included or and being tracked. That way, novelty is returned to in-game highlights. So bringing everything together, right? So research question one, right? We wanted to investigate participant sentiment, right? Once again, players like the idea of in-game highlight systems. I feel like they don't always work as intended. They have a sense of emotional accomplishment when selected, which is great. In regards to engagement, right? Participants were really engaged when it's themselves or a friend that was selected. And they're still curious to see what is selected versus some others who want to quickly find another match. And then finally, participants want more nuance in their highlights. They want to see more mechanical skill. They want to see more teamwork. They want to see more ability skill. And they want to see less ultimate abilities. And luckily, these metrics are very common in hero shooters. And so hopefully, although we focus on Overwatch here, these attributes and categories can apply to multiple hero shooters and multiple games to better find what players find most engaging in highlights. So the key takeaways for improving highlight systems and making them more engaging is having more positive public player recognition, as well as more skill expression and more nuance in the clips being selected. So to quickly bring all this together, and I'll leave this up during Q&A just so you can read it again if you like to. Starting from the left to right, our topic, right, we understand that video game highlights are an important factor in a game's success. However, selections don't always meet player expectations, thus limiting how often they share. We know that sharing clips is important for player engagement and building communities for both developers and players. And we know that Overwatch has been able to refine their preference for play the game, given that it's so long-standing in the community. For our research questions, we wanted to better understand what's the sentiment towards in-game highlight tools, make sure that sentiments online mirror the wider player base. We wanted to better understand why do players view or skip highlights. And then finally, we wanted to better understand what do they want to see from in-game highlight tools. For our methods, we had a survey with 102 participants, recruited via Discord and Facebook, with groups dedicated to Overwatch to really find players who were deep in the community and had a deep understanding of play the game and experience with seeing clips. We wanted to use a Likert scale and open responsive questions to better understand their sentiments. And then from those, we used clustered responses with close reading. And what we found. Finally, we found that players like the idea of in-game highlight tools, but not always satisfied with what's selected, causing some confusion. We know that participants want to see highlights focus more on mechanical skill, ability skill, teamwork, and less on ultimate abilities. And finally, participants want to see more nuance and public recognition for their efforts. So yeah, that concludes my presentation on better understanding what players find most engaging for in-game highlight tools. My name is Jordan Black, and I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for taking a listen and your time. So I'm ready for Q&A. Thank you so much.
So questions.
Yes.
I don't see any currently in the Q&A chat, but people can also feel free
I
to
see some hands
unmute.
going up.
Okay,
Let me
okay.
see here. Okay, yes. If you have a question, let me know, and I'll try to call your name and let me know. Or if Todd, you want to break the ice and start off, that works too.
Well, I'd say prioritize people who have their hands up.
Sure. Yeah, I see one question. Yes, go ahead. Yes, Jeff? Yes? Or maybe it was an accident. I'm not sure. They went down now. That's all right. Sorry, guys.
Okay. So I can, first of all, I just want to affirm the importance of this. Having kids who have maxed out a shared computer drive with video game
Yes.
clips. This is a very
Yes.
important part
Yes.
of game culture, and a very interesting set of questions to delve into. In your conclusions, you wrote, further research should implement play of the games that showcase mechanical skill, ability skill, ultimate ability skill, and teamwork, while also showcasing moments of nuance to better understand what players find most engaging, and so on. I have two questions. First of all,
Yes.
how difficult are each of these to computationally discern? Are there some that are easier than others to automate the process of being able to pick these sorts of nuances and desired showcases out?
Yes. So I think in regards to difficulty in tracking, I do think it is somewhat of a challenge, right? Obviously, you're doing this after a match concludes, so you want to quickly sift through attributes that you find most important and present at the end. Versus if you had a long time to process this information and find the best moment, that's a bit different, right? So the challenge here is one time, right? Being able to quickly find the best moment, right? And tracking these and also tracking these elements. In regards to difficulty, there are some games that have been able to track these elements, but haven't really used them to focus it on in-game highlights, right? They track them more just for analytics, right, or for statistics, right, of informing players like, hey, you're doing well in this attribute, or your ability usage on this is very, very good. And so, luckily, there are some metrics now that exist for tracking these. The challenge is just integrating these metrics in with in-game highlight systems. That way we can better find those moments, right? And players are very good and very clear at discussing moments that they feel are very important. They're very good at referencing specific moments that they feel are crucial for that nuance. And so I do think there is a way to better track these. I do think these moments are able to be found in games. The challenge is just bringing current methods together to bring that to life.
And that actually leads into a second question I have, which is that decision architects talk about trying to reduce friction in systems, and introducing a player voting system would be introducing friction. But do you think that engaging players in selecting most engaging play of the game would be sufficiently positive as to overcome the negatives of introducing that kind of friction in the in-game experience?
This is a great question. Okay, I'll try not to ramble. So, I think voting. Many players did mention wanting a voting system. That's great. I think the issue that we have is that if we introduce voting, it can create bias among players. So, for example, what if I play with a group of friends, right? And then we all vote for one of us, right? Maybe it's like four of us and one random, and then we all vote for my friend, right? So that can create a bias in the system. Where currently the system, since the algorithm the game chooses it, players feel it's more unbiased, so they feel have more sense of accomplishment. Like, oh, I earned that because the game selected it, not anyone else in the lobby, right? And so I do think a voting system does need to happen for sure, but not voting for play of the game. I think what might be a better idea is having supplemental material of like where maybe you recognize a player for having good eliminations, right, or good kills, or maybe they blocked a lot of enemy or healed a lot, right? They healed a lot, so you can vote for those and recognize those players for their contributions outside of play of the game, right? So kind of bringing those two together, of voting for maybe statistics, right, where players can feel like, oh wow, my teammates really agree with me that I did heal well, or my teammates really agree with me that I did get a lot of eliminations, right? My teammates agree with me that I did block a lot of or made a lot of space, right? I think voting for those elements are great because like the numbers are just there. When it comes to actually what's selected for play of the game, I think that should be an algorithm-based metric, just so that players still have a sense of accomplishment and feel like they're not cheated because they were outvoted, or there was some bias in regards to who won the award. That makes sense. So I think voting is great. Yes, yes.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions showing up in the Q&A panel,
That's
and
okay.
I'm not seeing any hands
Yes,
in the
I
in the
have
chat.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have
Okay.
a
Yes.
question.
Time for a quick question.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. You have some insight into, I would say, advice committees. For instance, if you have the World Championship for a game, like the game that we're now talking about is chess. So we have the World Championship, we have one challenger and one champion, but most parties have, I would say, surrounded themselves with, I would say, a team of helpers. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
And so what would now be your, say, advice to the team of helpers to have a good composition?
Okay, sorry. Could you say that one more time? Sorry, just so I can hear you again. It's probably related to chess. Yes.
Such a team of helpers should be composed by the world champion, or by the challenger of the world champion, of course, and he has also teammates, but also there are no written rules, but you the rules on feelings. But if you have feeling and you select, of course, the quality should be high, yes, and the cooperation should also be high. That I understand, yes, and also the teaching material should also be high. But for instance, they should not be stubborn. They should be cooperative, as you understand, in such a team. Yes. So, do you have experience with that? Have you theories about that? Did you can give advice on the composition of such a team?
I'm not sure that I have any theories on that quite yet. I think really, if I'm trying to understand your question, is the idea of having like a championship team, right, and having helpers, people that support that idea. I think really, I'm not sure quite how yet I would integrate that into this research, but I think it's a good talking point. I think it's important to keep in mind, and something that I'll keep in mind for future work. So thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I give one example. For instance,
We should probably make time for
Sure.
the next talk, but I want to thank you, Jordan,
Sure, we can
so
talk later,
much.
though. Thank you so much.
For,
Thank you.
yeah. We'll have extra time after these talks because we had one talk that was canceled. We've shifted them forward, so we have a nice gap where people can talk after the next talk.
Perfect.
But thank you again very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jordan. And so for this next talk, we're going to have Gregg Rautine share joint work with Jeremy Blum on mechanism design for player-judged games such as Apples to Apples, where they introduce a mechanism of including random distractor submissions and a reward for the judge selecting player submissions in order to sufficiently reduce a judging player's perverse incentive to collude with a trailing player.
Thank you, Todd, for that introduction. Yes, so let me get into it. In the world of player-judged games, each player would take a turn judging the submissions of the other players. We decided that in the basic rules of the game, there is a possibility that the players could act strategically and not actually choose the best submissions, either to plan for a future round or prevent another player from scoring. The motivation of this, as I said, was that the parties, actors in the games can be strategic competitors, and there's always a balancing game between fair play and strategic advantage. So the goal here is to try to align the incentives of the game so that fair play, meaning picking the best submission, becomes the rational choice for the players. We had a baseline of where we just assumed that the judge was going to intentionally avoid the best submissions. So we modeled the game, giving the in the extensive form game, we modeled the reward for the judge for picking the player card. Well, we'll get into that next slide. Sorry, but we want to introduce a mechanism that makes the judging fair, and that so that the payoffs for the judge will promote him to pick the best match. We want to introduce the concept of distractor cards, which are cards that are picked randomly from the deck and added to the submission that the judge receives, and also a modest reward for the judge when he picks a player submission or picks a player card. We modeled the game as a 3-agent game with the honest player, which really wasn't a strategic player. It was just a stand-aside player that would just play the highest card in the hand. The strategic player, who will either play the lowest or the highest card in the hand, and the judge will pick either the lowest or the highest card. We modeled as an extensive form game, which, for those that don't know, extensive form games have steps in them, where in these steps, the two players would pick their cards, they would submit them, and then the judge would declare the winner. Imperfect information would be that each player only knows about his own information set. So each player only knows what cards they have in their own hand and don't know about what decisions, how the judge ranks cards, or how the other player, what the other player holds. And the anonymized submissions just means that the judge does not know which card the player submitted. We performed our equilibrium analysis with counterfactual regret minimization, which is a analysis method to determine correlated equilibriums the way we modeled it is we went through the entire game tree. So we went through each decision, each player choosing the high and the low card, and the judge choosing the high and low card, and then developing the strategy profiles for each hand, for each that each player or judge sees. So if the player has 1, 2, 3, and 4, then he would have a strategy profile picking either the low or the high card. The baseline model, we discretized the choices of the deck into integers 1 through 4, with 4 being the highest, with a skewed distribution. It's basically a binary distribution where we had 2 cards of 4, 4 of 3, and doubled, so forth, so that you have more lower match choices, which would be indicative of a real world game where the matching would be to the cards would be, for a good match, is going to be rare. The player submits 1 card. Again, as said, the judge picks the higher or the lower card without knowing the origin. And we had 2 scenarios of how the judge would have his incentives. The first one was where the player would lead, where we would incentivize through the payout, incentivize the judge to pick the honest player's card, and the reverse of that would be where the honest player leads the game. We would incentivize through a payout the judge to select the opportunistic or the player's card. When we had scenario A, we found out that we ended up with a mixed strategy. There was fairness there because the payout for the best strategy for the player was to play the high card, because the judge would not know who played the high card, so he would also be picked to play the high card. So in this scenario A, we actually had some fairness in the game, where the player and the honest players' cards were picked with pretty much relatively same frequency. In scenario B, since we had bias toward in the payouts, we had bias toward the judge picking the player's card. The player would end up playing low cards, and the judge would also be picking the low cards. And the result of that was that the player wins about 95% of the time. So the conclusion of the baseline results was that we could not guarantee fairness without some type of intervention in the game, and we decided to make it through mechanism design. So we added an integer k distractor cards from the same deck as it gets picked as when the submissions are made. The judge is restricted to 2 strategies: either pick the highest or the lowest with uniform ties, pick a card at random if there's a tie, and a positive reward for the judge selecting a non-distractor, which would align the incentives of the game to for him to pick the better card, because the chance that a distractor card would be a good match for the card in play would be pretty low, because it's a random selection. For our CFR equilibrium methodology, we took 30 independent profiles runs of each of the combination of distractor cards and rewards, and ran those 20 million times each, and then averaged those 30 for the results in the results section. The measure of fairness that we were going for was that the probability that the judge would have selected the high value card in each trial. So in the results that we came up with, we have this for the baseline of the 0 there is for 0 distractors. It's a constant because it doesn't vary with a reward, because the reward was only awarded if the judge picked the player card when there were distractors present. So, but we noticed that if we have 1 distractor card, the fairness ended up with a judge reward of 2, so a modest reward, ended up being 69% of the time. Whereas with the 2 distractor choice, it was already above 99%. So we had determined that with a small reward and distractors, it shifts all the equilibrium strategies towards fairness. So, and we verified those with an independent run of taking the strategy that was output by the CFR into a generic run of the game to verify the payouts and the percentage of that the judge select the high card. The mechanism design respects the anonymization of the cards due to the way that the adding the distractors and the reward. It also reduces any kind of advantage that players might have if they want to collude. For instance, by signaling if the player will submit a low card, and the judge knows that if I see a low submission, I know it's this person. I've colluded with them, so I'm going to pick their submission instead of a higher choice. Our concept also illustrates that a mechanism design principle that you don't change the rules of the game or the player preferences, you change the payouts. So in say in a real world game, you would reward you'd add distractors to the submission the judge would see, and then the judge would receive maybe a fractional point or a point for selecting a player card versus a distractor. The limitations that we have identified is that this was just only a single round abstraction. There was no adaptation by any of the players for their strategy. All the strategy was the same. There was no historical use of any kind of data to affect the choices of the player or the judge. There's only one strategic player and the judge. There weren't any coalitions between any other players. Could have two players that were playing as a strategic operators, and it also assumes rational play by the judge and the player by the way that the CFR converged. So we want to in the future work we probably want to we did not model any human bias, which could be possible in these type of games. There's no reputational dynamics, and it would like to extend it to multi-round play to simulate an actual game. So the formal model of player judge fairness was it ended up determining that we can change the rules of the game to or not change the rules, but add these changes to the mechanism to align the incentives of the judge to select the best match. We still had a good sweep of across parameters for the number of distractors added for the game and the reward that was awarded to the judge. And like I said, in future, we'd like to add multi-round dynamics and simulate some coalitions between players, or add social factors, any kind of reputational or social factors to the simulation. And I'd like to add that there was significant foundation work that I had pulled from several sources. These are just a few, but the most important ones were John Nash from 1950, the Hart Mas-Kalel paper from 2000, the Zingovich paper from 2007, and the Neller Lang-Todd paper from 2013. So thank you. That concludes the presentation. I'm now open to questions. Thank you for your attendance here. And
thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm looking for raised hands in the participant list, and I'm not seeing any yet. I do not see any questions in the Q&A chat. So I will start out the questions here with an observation that when my kids play a game like this, apples to apples in particular, they have certain favorite noun cards that among them seem to be automatic picks, regardless of the goodness of the adjective match. And I understand you've researched an abstracted model here, but would you conjecture that introducing some number of random cards, which could increase, and a judging reward would disincentivize sibling collusion?
I think that it might disincentivize it, yes, because you think you'd have there is a possibility, even though a small one, that one of the distractors might actually be a good match. So, but yeah, there was actually an anecdotal story that I was talking about my project to a random person one day, and they had actually said that when they play games like this, they actually add extra cards to the selection, which was fascinating to me, that it was something actually done in practice.
Interesting. Other questions from others? I have a second question, but I don't want to crowd out other questions. So my question from this is, it seems like having even a single distractor card and a high enough judge reward for not selecting a distractor would also promote fairness, but I'd imagine that this would greatly affect the player experience. So how do you anticipate that players would react to, for example, missing out on a judging reward because the random distractor card happened to have a high value, even if that's low probability?
Well, I mean, we did think about that possibility coming up, but overall, it might be just it might be a minor annoyance, but overall, I think the player experience would benefit for a lot from the addition of the card than as a negative. If that makes any sense.
Other questions out there? Okay. If not, then I believe this is the last of the sessions for today. And so before we have informal Q&A beyond and stop the recording and such, would one of the organizers like to talk about startup time tomorrow and what to expect?
Yeah, thank you, Todd, and thank you to the speakers of this final session. Very nice talks. Thank you for being here.
Now, I know that Yep, that you had another question that we didn't have time for earlier. It looks like Jordan's still here. Did you want to ask that question?
Yes, I'm still here, but no pressure.
Okay.
There we go. Yay, thank you.
We can
Yes,
hear you now.
okay.
We can
Yes,
hear you
yes.
now.
Okay. You remember we had sometimes matches with Kortsnoy and other people, and Kortsnoy had a team of, I would say, now colleagues. I would say Keen and Steen were his main advisors, yes? And there was also a third advisor, and most of the time the team was not a unit for Kortsnoy, but had their own, I would say, their own interests. So he had, I would say, composed the team in the wrong way. Yes. And now my question was to him from, do you have advice for, I would say, a leader, how to compose a team of intellectual gifted persons which I would say do not quarrel among themselves?
Was that question for me?
Now it was a question on getting advice. And you get advice from, I would say, persons who are, let's say, in whatever
Now,
branch.
would this be advice for what would be selected as the highlight of the game?
Now that is, for instance, yeah. Just so you I would say you prepare for the next match, and in your preparation you have to, I would say, to agree on the tactic. Do you play a little bit defensive or aggressive, or is it your last chance or whatever? Yes. So there are all kinds of things, of strategies that you can follow. And of course, it is nice if you have a team which are on one line to advise these strategies. But if you have already a discussion in the team, then of course you are not on your best when you play as a world champion or for a world champion challenger, and you are not backed up in the right way. That was my question. So, what is your advice to get a team around you for a top performance, which have not a quarrel among themselves?
Okay. Yes. Okay. I think I understand your question. I think in regards to that, I think that comes down to leadership, to be honest, really, when it comes to having a team, right, and them not working together. I think the important part is to realign on the common goal the team has, right? Sometimes your own personal biases or issues can get in the way of understanding, hey, we're here to win, right? We're here to compete. We're here to work as a team, right? So I think that's what I would say is really important, and aligning player intuitions, right, of what they're looking for.
Yes, but you took already a nice and good word, that is leadership. So if you have I would say, a match between the best of the world and the second best of the world, yes, and then you have a team around it, who is the leader of that team? Is that somebody else, or is that just the one who is the best of the world?
I think it depends on the team synergy, right? Sometimes the leader isn't always the best player, but maybe has like the most knowledge, and maybe a veteran, right, on the team who really leads maybe younger players on the path to success, right? So I think it really depends on the dynamic of what that composition is, and it can vary between teams. Sometimes it is the best player, right? The best player is the leader who calls all the shots, who makes all the plays, versus someone who might not be the best player but helps assist and leads and has a vision that maybe the best player might not have.
I fully agree with you, and that's also the case. But in practice, sometimes it could be a little bit else, as you understand already. Because you have a world champion who is, I would say, very good, but not a leader, not a team builder, for instance, etc. So my question, in fact, was, how do you handle that situation? And have you, I would say, kind of criteria where you can classify the different teams?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I think when it comes to city, like the world champion, right? Like I'm the best player in the world, therefore
Yes,
I should be calling all the shots, right?
yes,
I
yes,
think
yes,
I think even with that being the case, I think if you are a world champion, you realize the importance of having people around to support you, right? If
yes,
you're the best
yes,
athlete in any field, you understand I need time to practice. I need good opponents to practice with. I need good people to review my gameplay and tell me how I can improve, right? And so I think that can help supplement the idea that leaders understand the value of people around them, and can hopefully mitigate that like toxic, egotistical nature
yes,
between
yes,
people
yes, yes.
and the supports.
There are all items who play a role in that decision, I would say.
Yes.
So my
Yeah.
question, in fact, was: do you have developed theories who handle these questions?
I don't think so. Not quite yet. I think my research hasn't quite gone down that route yet, but I think it's worth investigating, right? For sure. I think really investigating again, it's probably most relevant to like really esports, right? Of how
Yes,
you have those professional environments with coaches, with players, with organizations, right? Of understanding and investigating what is that dynamic like and how does that affect teams and how they play. Because there are many examples of players who are the best on their team and being very, very rude to other people around them, and that can
yes,
be a
yes,
detriment to their overall success,
yes,
right?
yes,
So I haven't found a way
yes.
to classify that and organize it quite yet, but I would definitely be worth investigating that for sure. I think it's a great talking point. So thank you.
Okay. Now take it into account, and maybe you have something. You could do something with. Ted, thank you
Yeah.
very much for giving me the opportunity to still have a question. And
Yes. Thank you.
okay, thank you.